The first half, or a little bit more than the first half, of MotoGP 2025 is over here at Brno, and we've decided to mark the occasion by picking out some winners and losers, because that's a fun format to do, and I've decided to add an extra bit of fun to it by having Simon and I not tell each other what our picks are. So I'm sure it's going to get a little difficult for the two of us not to stumble over each other, but I think that's more authentic and it's more fun. Before we get into it, there's one winner we've decided just like not to do, or to do by default. Marc Marquez obviously is a winner of the start of 2025. He's won 5 in a row. He's going to walk it to this championship, absolutely, assuming he stays healthy. And even if he gets slightly unhealthy, should still be able to do it. Not particularly interesting to discuss right now. Great job. Obviously, the man of the moment. Simon, give me your first winner.
I mean, my first winner is Marco Bezzecchi, because the Aprilia looks like such a solid package this year that, that we kind of expected it would be the second best bike in the grid, right? That's the way they came into this season from last year. It looked solid. But Marco Bezzecchi was signed as the number 2 rider. He was brought in as the guy that was going to sit alongside Jorge Martin, who was going to support him, to help develop the bike, and be good, but not be as good as the guy that was their number 1 pick, the reigning world champion. But because of everything that's gone on, because of all the injuries, Bez has kind of flipped that. He's been the guy that has become the Aprilia talisman that we expected that Martin would be. So for me, that makes him, a clear favourite. Obviously, the fact that he's won races on top of that is just the cherry on top. But it's his kind of consistent overall performance, especially considering it took a little bit of time to get there, that makes him stand out as the first surefire winner of the year for me.
All right, let's get into mine. I agree with that one. I think that's fair enough. Mine is slightly left field. Johan Zarco is my number 1 winner. Well, not the number 1 in terms of ranking, but the number 1 that I've decided to pick. Obviously, Jean Mir has had some bad luck, including some bad luck here. But it's also, there's a lot of evidence now that whatever Zarco was doing last season is no fluke, that his value to Honda is at an all-time high, especially now that it's failed to lure over Jorge Martin for 2026. Zarco is talking of himself at Honda as the guy, and he's backing it up with performances on track. Not everything is going smooth. There's some areas of his game that are stronger than others, but he's had a hell of a half season. You just need to look at the points table to see what the situation is. The fact that he's crossed over into triple digits and no other Honda rider has got even close. Your loser number 1.
Oh, my loser number 1. We're going it that way. I mean, I'm going to stick with Aprilia. It's Jorge Martin, because I know he's been injured, right? So he's been injured and he's missed a big chunk of the season. Let's detach completely from that and talk about the politics and the polemics that have went on within the Aprilia garage. He's come out of it looking really badly. He's got to be right now the most unliked world champion since Jorge Lorenzo, reigning world champion since the Jorge Lorenzo era, because he's managed to make himself look like a bit of an ass. He's lost fans by pulling off this crazy Aprilia power play, trying to go to a worse Honda, only to realize that the Aprilia is a considerably better bike and have to come back to it. There's no way in which this looks like a positive for me for him. And I think he's going to have a lot of work to do over the next 6 months to start convincing people to cheer for him again. And at the end of the day, I know that's not as important as results, but in the year that it is, with the step that he's made away from results, away from Ducati to go to Aprilia and reinvent himself at this new project, kind of the love of the people around you is the next best thing, and there's not much of that right now either. So I think he's dug himself into a hole, and it's going to take a bit of time for him to get out of it and to start being able to really flex who he is again.
My pick for loser number 1 is Alexander Rins. I do not know if his name is Alexander. I suspect not, but I decided to say it that way anyway. I could have picked Mikel Oliveira for this one, considering he's in a real tough spot, but Oliveira at least has the injury to fall back on. Rins has the extra year on the Yamaha that does not appear to have done him any good, just weekend after weekend. Something just isn't quite right, and the underlying pace to latch onto isn't there. There are riders in this paddock who are maybe not doing so well, but there are glimpses, there are moments, there are positive signs. There's something you can hang your hat on, basically. There's something that you can point to and say, this is going to be the breakthrough. For Alex Rins, that doesn't exist right now. There is, in my humble view, there is nothing. There is no qualifying pace. The race pace might be okay, but with the lack of qualifying pace, the race pace isn't anything special. The comparison to Fabio Quartararo is disastrous. He's had such a difficult time. We've all been wondering whether his body quite works right for him, which is never a great sign. I think he's healed up decently, but just there's some fundamental mismatch with this Yamaha, and I just don't see it getting better anytime soon, but I hope to be proven wrong. Simon, your winner number dos.
So, this is maybe also a bit of a left field one. I think it's Joan Mir.
Huh?
Because Val loves that suggestion, as you can tell from his face. I mean, the guy's gone from crashing on his own at a 15th place to being wiped out of P5 in the space of 6-9 months. The Honda is improving, and Mir is, when he's delivering, the best Honda rider, fairly consistently in terms of pace and basically position he's knocked off out of at the minute. And they know what's wrong. They know that the source of the frustration, that the final bit that's missing is engine power. They've just hired, arguably the finest engine builder in MotoGP by stealing Kurt Trieb away from KTM. They've got another 6 months this year. He's got another year in his contract. And I think actually what we see right now is the kind of the origin story for something that should be a lot better in 12 months' time, whenever they've had a year of development from Kurt Trieb and suddenly an engine that works really well and is a bike that gives him the one thing he says he's missing.
Well, I would struggle to make the Mir case, but that's the beauty of this format that I came up with. My winner, the other winner, is Alex Marquez, and let's ignore what happened this weekend specifically because it's still quite fresh in my memory, obviously. But if we take that aside, overall, over the whole of the year, Alex has been less error prone than usual. He's been much more consistent than usual. He's been fast in most conventional conditions. He has been good value for his second place in the championship. Even with this debacle at Brno, he still has 40 points in hand over Pecco Bagnaia. He has established himself as a bona fide, genuine, I think most people at this point in the paddock would agree, top 10 rider on the grid, or at least in the conversation for it. And if that doesn't sound like a lot, or if that sounds like I'm speaking disrespectfully about the guy second in the championship, you have to remember that if you looked at it 2 years ago and he was, if he was doing the LCR Honda thing, etc., top 10 rider in the championship was not in the conversation. The conversation was, is this guy going to stay on the grid? I think this season has ensured there's a lot more time that Alex Marquez is going to get. And maybe he's going to get a worse contract at some point. Maybe he's going to get, maybe this is as good as it's going to get, but at least this is already better than we could have imagined a bit ago. Simon, your final loser.
So the obvious answer, 3 losers into this conversation, is Pecco Bagnaia. And I have a feeling you may make that argument in yours, but I'm not going to, because I think actually one of the biggest disappointments for the year for me so far is Brad Binder. Brad Binder, who has been KTM's talisman since basically he joined the project, turned up to here at Brno in 2020, 3 races in, and won his 3rd race for them. It's just not been there this year. This is the first year ever that we've seen him not just not best KTM, but like arguably the 3rd or the 4th KTM rider, because Maverick Vinales and Ea Bastianini, as well as Pedro Acosta, have all been performing better than him. And he's looking vulnerable for the first time in his whole KTM career. It looks like maybe he's not KTM's long-term future, the way that we thought whenever he first signed that 4-year contract that takes him up until the end of next season, made him look.
Yeah, my short list for the final spot for me was those 2 names that you named, so thank you for setting me up. Brad Binder, great pick. Pecco Bagnaia, great pick, unfortunately, for Pecco. I mean, look, the points are coming, the podiums are are quite often showing up, but when you're a Ducati factory rider with this Ducati, that has to happen. The truth is that the comparison to Marc Marquez has proven disastrous in terms of, I would say, in terms of stock, in terms of perception, or at least in terms of removing that plausible deniability that maybe Bagnaia could go toe-to-toe with the greatest of all time, the arguable greatest of all time, on the same bike. Marc has come in and has made this his house immediately. On the tracks where Bagnaia should have the edge, it's only really been par, and maybe Marc sometimes still has a little bit more. On tracks where Marquez should have the edge, there has been no contest whatsoever. It's been a total walkover. Marc has just looked better at every part of the game, which will be very, very difficult to accept for Bagnaia. It doesn't mean that his long-term future is doomed. It doesn't mean anything like that. There are still pathways for Pecco to recover his standing, his position, but this has been a bruising half season. This has been difficult, and I think we suspected it could go this way, but when there's plausible deniability, you kind of need that, and that's gone. That's gone after this half season.